it is late again. You are standing in the kitchen with the light low, the kettle just starting to tick as the water heats, and your shoulders are still carrying every small thing that piled up since morning. Your neck feels tight. Your mind is still running through the list that never quite empties. You reach for a mug because that is the one small comfort you have promised yourself tonight, a warm cup and a quiet corner and permission to stop. Now picture something a little different. The thing that softens the edge of this evening is not sitting in a cardboard box on a shelf, wrapped in plastic, waiting for you to remember to buy more. It is growing 3 feet from the window you are looking through right now. A little pot of green, leaves you brushed with your fingers on the way in, releasing a scent that already made you breathe a touch slower. You did not order it online. You did not overpay for it. You grew it, and tonight it goes straight into your cup. That is what this whole video is about. Calming edible plants you can grow in a single pot, on a windowsill, a balcony rail, a back step, or a patio table. Plants that ask almost nothing of you and give back a quiet ritual once the day is done. I have gathered 13 of them, and every single one grows happily in a container, which means you do not need a yard, a raised bed, or strong knees to kneel in the dirt for hours. If you have a sunny sill and a mug, you already have enough to begin. And that is really the heart of why a pot works so well for calming herbs in particular. When you are tired, the last thing you want is a garden that turns into another chore on the list. A container sits at the height you choose, on a table or a rail or a bright kitchen counter, so there is no bending, no digging, and no wrestling with a hose. You can move it into the light or out of a cold snap in a few seconds. You can tend it while the kettle heats. For anyone in a small apartment or rented place, or a body that no longer enjoys kneeling in the soil, that little pot is the whole garden, and it is more than enough. Here is the part that surprised me when I first started growing these. The store-bought Calm, the little tins of specialty tea with soft photography on the label, cost far more than the plant that makes the exact same thing. A single starter herb, the kind you can carry home in one hand, will hand you cup after cup after cup, season after season, for the price of one fancy box. Think about that for a moment. You buy the box once and it empties. You buy the plant once and it fills. We will come back to that math a little later, because once you actually see it laid out, the shelf at the store starts to look a little silly. And I want to be honest with you about something before we go a single step further. None of these plants are medicine, and I am not going to pretend they are. These are traditional use plants, herbs people have leaned on for a very long time to help them settle and unwind once the day releases them. I will keep the language honest all the way through this list. There is a fuller version of that promise coming a bit later, a proper little pause where I lay out exactly how to think about all of this. For now, just hold on to the spirit of it. We are talking about soothing rituals and gentle traditions, not cures and never dosages. One more thing before we start planting, because I do not want you to miss it. Somewhere in the middle of this list is a plant that almost nobody would guess belongs here. You grow it not for its leaves and not for its flowers exactly, but for a single crimson thread hidden inside each bloom. It has been treasured for centuries. It costs a small fortune at the store, more per ounce than most things in your kitchen. And you can grow it in a shallow pot the size of a dinner plate. I will tell you which one it is when we get there. Just keep it tucked in the back of your mind as we go, the plant grown for one red thread. All right. Let us start with the easiest, friendliest plant on the entire list, the one I always steer nervous beginners toward first. Plant 1 is lemon balm. If you have never grown a single herb in your life, this is where you begin, because lemon balm is almost impossible to discourage. It belongs to the mint family, and like its cousins, it is a survivor. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, lemon balm is hardy all the way down through USDA Zone 3, where winters can be brutal and the ground freezes hard, and it keeps right on thriving up through Zone 9, which covers most of the warmer parts of the country. What that range really means for you is simple. Wherever you happen to live, this plant probably already wants to grow there. The first time you rub a lemon balm leaf between your finger and thumb, you understand the name in an instant. It smells like fresh lemon peel, bright and clean, with just a soft herbal sweetness underneath. That scent alone is part of why gardeners have kept it close for so long. Traditional Medicinals, a company that has worked with this herb for decades, describes lemon balm as an old European favorite, a plant that monks and herbalists tended in monastery gardens and affectionately called a heart-gladdening herb. People have reached for it across the centuries to help calm the nerves and settle a busy mind before rest. That is the tradition we step into when we grow it. Not a promise and not a claim. Just a very old and very gentle habit worth keeping alive. Growing it in a pot could not be more forgiving. Bonnie Plants, one of the larger herb growers, recommends giving lemon balm a bit of room to spread its roots. So reach for a pot around 18 inches wide if you have the space, though honestly a smaller patio planter will still keep you in leaves all season. Fill it with ordinary potting mix, the plain bagged kind from any garden center, and set the plant so the top of its root ball sits just level with the soil surface. Water it in well the first day so the roots settle. And then here is the secret that makes tired hands fall in love with this plant. You mostly leave it alone. Lemon balm seems to genuinely thrive on a little neglect. It wants sun, and it will give you its best flavor with a good half day of it, but it tolerates afternoon shade without any complaint at all. In fact, the growing guides note something rather charming here. Plants given a bit of shade often grow larger, more tender leaves, which happen to be exactly the leaves you want for a soothing cup. So if the only spot you have gets bright morning light and then falls into shade by the afternoon, do not worry for a second. Your lemon balm may quietly love you for it. You do not need to fuss, mist feed, or hover. A pot, a sunny-ish corner, and the occasional drink of water is the entire job. Harvesting is where the whole thing pays you back, and it starts sooner than you might expect. Once the plant reaches about 6 to 8 inches tall, you can begin picking, and the almanac's advice is refreshingly simple. Pinch the leaves off by hand, or snip a whole stem with a pair of scissors. The one rule worth remembering is to never take more than about a third of the plant at any one time, so it always has plenty left to bounce back from. Early morning is the finest moment to gather, once the dew has dried off but while the leaves are still cool, because that is when their fragrant oils sit at their strongest. The younger leaves near the growing tips carry the most lemon, so favor those for a fresh cup. Then comes the part your whole tired body has been waiting for. Take a small handful of fresh leaves, tear them lightly with your fingers to bruise them, and wake up that lemon oil, and drop them into your mug. Pour water that has just come off the boil over the top, then set a small saucer over the rim so none of that scent can escape as steam. Let it steep for about 5 minutes, maybe a touch longer if you like it a little stronger. What you get is a pale golden cup that smells like a whole lemon grove and tastes soft and mild, faintly sweet, with none of the sharpness you might brace yourself for. It is the sort of cup you wrap both hands around and hold for a while before you even sip. And because it is so gentle, it makes a lovely, unhurried companion for the evening, sipped slowly while the day finally loosens its grip and lets you go. That is Plant 1, the friendliest starter you will ever grow. If lemon balm is the leaf you crush for calm, our second plant is the flower you drink for it, and it may just be the most famous soothing herb in the entire world. Plant 2 is chamomile. You already know this one, even if you have never grown it yourself, because you have almost certainly seen it printed on a tea box with the word bedtime somewhere on the label. But here is what most tea drinkers never stop to realize. Chamomile is a tiny daisy. That is genuinely all it is. A cheerful little white flower with a bright golden center, no taller than your knee, that you can raise in a pot on a sunny sill and pick by the small handful. The version you want for tea is usually German chamomile, and the growing guides at places like Homestead and Chill and Grow a Good Life will point you straight to it, because it gives you the most flowers over a full season. The tradition behind chamomile runs deep and, thankfully, stays honest. It is one of the oldest calming herbs on record, gathered across Europe and far beyond, and traditionally used to help people ease mild tension and wind down before rest. That is the gentle, defensible frame I want you to carry with you. People have long reached for a warm cup of chamomile as a wind-down ritual, not because it fixes or cures anything, but because the small ceremony of it, the warmth and the soft floral scent and the pause it forces you to take, quietly tells the body that the work of the day is finished. Growing chamomile in a container is genuinely easy, with just one quirk you need to know up front. The seeds need light to germinate, which means you do not bury them at all. Gardenary and the other guides all say the very same thing here. You fill a well-draining pot, at least 6 inches deep and around a foot across, with a rich potting mix, then you moisten it thoroughly, and simply sprinkle the seeds right across the top of the surface. Do not cover them with soil. Press them very lightly so they make good contact with the damp mix, and just keep them from drying out while they sprout. That is the whole trick, and it is why so many people who thought they had a black thumb succeed with chamomile. It wants full sun, ideally 6 hours a day or more, though it will forgive you a little light shade if that is all your balcony can offer. Then this cheerful little plant does something wonderful for the busy and the forgetful among us. It self-seeds. German chamomile scatters its own seeds so willingly that if you leave even half the flowers unpicked as the season winds down, you are very likely to find fresh plants coming up entirely on their own the following year. You plant it once and it quietly decides to keep you supplied all over again. For anyone who wants a calming little garden without a lot of ongoing fuss and re-sowing, that is about as generous as a plant gets. Harvesting chamomile is a small daily pleasure rather than a chore, and it turns out to be strangely calming in itself. You wait until the little flowers are fully open, their white petals spread wide, and the yellow center rounded and bright. The harvest guides suggest mid-morning as the ideal moment, once the dew has burned off but well before the strong midday sun beats down. Then you simply pinch the flower heads off between your fingers, giving each a light shake to send any tiny insect visitors on their way. A healthy patch of chamomile keeps producing for weeks on end, so you can wander over and gather a few blossoms every couple of days, and the plant just cheerfully makes more to replace them. To bring it into your cup, you can use the flowers either fresh or dried. The garden guides give a simple rule of thumb. Dried chamomile is more concentrated, so roughly a teaspoon of dried flowers makes 1 cup, while fresh flowers are milder, so you use about twice as many. Drop your blossoms into a tea infuser or a little muslin pouch, pour just boiled water over them, cover the cup to hold in all that aroma, and let it steep for around 5 minutes. What rises up out of the mug is that unmistakable soft scent, something a little like apples and honey and warm hay all at once, and the tea itself pours out pale gold and mellow. This is the very cup people have quietly closed out their evenings with for countless generations. And now it can grow right there on your own sill for the cost of a single packet of seeds. Between these 2 plants alone, the leaf and the flower, lemon balm and chamomile, you already have the makings of a soothing evening cup that costs you next to nothing to grow and keeps giving back long after a store-bought box would have run empty. But there is a whole other way a plant can quiet you, and this one does not even ask you to fill the kettle. Some of these calming herbs go to work the very moment you walk past them, releasing their scent into the air of the room before a single leaf ever touches hot water. That is exactly where we are heading next, to the plants that soothe you through the air itself, beginning with one whose fragrance is so tied to rest that entire industries were built on the smell of it. That plant is lavender, and it is the reason so many people think of a scent before they think of a cup. You have smelled it 100 times without ever growing a stem of it. It is folded into the soap on the bathroom shelf, tucked into the little sachet in the sock drawer, sprayed across pillowcases in a bottle that cost more than a whole plant would have. And that is exactly the point I want to sit with for a moment. Somewhere along the way, the fragrance of this humble garden shrub got packaged, priced, and sold back to us, when the plant that makes it will grow contentedly in a clay pot on a sunny sill and hand you that same scent for free, over and over, for years. Lavender's link to rest is old, and it is honest. People noticed a very long time ago that the smell of it seemed to settle them. Island Lavender, a grower that writes about the plant's long history, describes how it was carried through medieval Europe and used across the centuries as a soothing, calming fragrance, something reached for to ease a tired mind and help with rest. The Romans scented their baths with it. Herb gardeners kept it by the door for hundreds of years. That is the tradition we are stepping into here, and I want to be careful with my words the same way I promised I would be. Lavender is not medicine. What we can say plainly and honestly is that it carries a soothing aroma, one that people have leaned on for generations to help them unwind. That gentle, defensible frame is all we need. The scent alone is the gift. Now, if you are going to grow a lavender you can actually bring into the kitchen, the variety matters. So let me save you a small mistake. The one you want is English lavender, known botanically as Lavandula angustifolia. According to the guidance at B&B Family Farm, all the cultivars within that species are considered edible, with a mild, sweet, softly floral flavor, because they carry very little of a compound called camphor. The showier French and Spanish lavenders hold far more of it, which is why they can taste sharp, bitter, almost soapy on the tongue. So when you are standing at the garden center reading little plastic tags, look for that word angustifolia, or simply for the words English lavender or culinary lavender, printed right on the label. That is your plant. Here is the happy news for anyone with a busy schedule and a forgetful watering can. Lavender genuinely prefers to be left a little thirsty. It is a Mediterranean plant at heart, so it wants what a sunny hillside would give it, plenty of light and soil that drains fast. Garden design and great garden plants both point new growers toward an unglazed clay or terracotta pot, at least 12 inches across, precisely because those porous walls wick away extra moisture and let the roots breathe. Fill it with an ordinary potting mix, then loosen it up with a good handful of sand, perlite, or fine grit so water runs straight through rather than sitting around the roots. Set the pot where it catches at least 6 hours of sun a day, the brightest spot you have. And then you water it sparingly, letting the soil dry out between drinks. Think of it a little like keeping a good loaf of bread. It does far better on the dry side of the counter than sealed up damp in a bag, where it turns. Lavender is the same. Overwatering is truly the only reliable way to lose it, so when you are tempted to fuss and pour, that is precisely the moment to walk away and leave it be. Bringing the scent out of the plant is the loveliest part, and it happens in 2 different ways. The first is instant and asks nothing of you. Simply run your open hand across the tops of the stems as you pass by, or pinch a leaf between 2 fingers, and the fragrance lifts straight into the air. That is your evening softening a little before you have even sat down. The second way is the harvest, and Great Garden Plants gives a simple rule for timing it. Cut your stems on a dry morning after the dew has burned off, choosing spikes where about 1/3 to half of the tiny buds have opened, because that is when the fragrant oils are richest. Bundle the stems, tie the ends with a bit of string, and hang them upside down somewhere cool and out of direct sun. Once they are fully dry, the buds strip off easily, and stored in a small jar they hold their scent for the better part of a year. Those dried buds are where lavender crosses from a scent you enjoy into a cup you can drink. A small pinch of the dried flowers, no more than 1/4 teaspoon in a mug, steeped in just boiled water and covered for about 5 minutes, gives you a pale, gently floral tea. And here is the one caution worth repeating, because lavender is bold. Dried lavender runs about 3 times stronger than fresh, and a little goes a very long way. Too much and your tea starts to taste like the inside of that sock drawer. So begin light, taste, and add more next time only if you want it. Used with a gentle hand, it is a soft, aromatic cup, the kind that smells like a warm evening in a garden. But truthfully, even if you never brewed a drop of it, the pot would earn its place on your sill for the fragrance alone, released every time you brush past on your way to the kettle. If lavender is the scent the whole world already knows, our 4th plant is one that far fewer people have grown, though it has been quietly treasured for thousands of years in another part of the world. Plant 4 is holy basil, which you will very often see sold under its beautiful traditional name, tulsi. Now, this is not the sweet basil you tear over a plate of tomatoes and mozzarella. It is a cousin, a member of the same fragrant family, but its aroma is something else entirely, warmer and more complex, with notes that people describe as clove-like, peppery, a little sweet, almost incense on the air. Rub a leaf and the whole feeling of it is different. Where sweet basil smells like a summer kitchen, tulsi smells like something older and calmer, a plant that has been burned as incense and steeped into tea for a very, very long time. And the tradition here truly is deep. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, holy basil has been used in the traditional wellness practices of India for something in the order of 3,000 years, and it is held in such high regard that the name Tulsi is often translated as the incomparable one. In that tradition, it is described as an adaptogen, and I want to unpack that word honestly, rather than let it sound like a promise. An adaptogen, in the traditional way of thinking, is simply a plant reached for to help the body settle and steady itself under the ordinary pressures of a day. Think of it the way you might think of a thermostat in a house. It is not a cure for hot summers or cold winters. It is just a gentle thing that helps the whole system find its comfortable middle again. That is the spirit in which Tulsi has been used for centuries, as a calming, grounding cup at the end of a long day. Not a medicine. A very old habit worth keeping. Growing it in a pot is a real pleasure, with one condition you need to respect. Tulsi loves warmth. It is a tender plant that comes from a hot climate, so it will not survive a frost, which means for most of us it either lives happily outdoors through the warm months and comes indoors before the cold, or it simply sits on a bright, warm windowsill year-round. Practical self-reliance and sow right seeds both recommend a container in roughly the 8 to 10 inch range, or a little larger, with good drainage holes and a mix loosened with a bit of sand or compost so water moves through. Then you give it what it craves above all else, sun. 6 to 8 hours of direct light a day is what keeps it lush and full of that fragrant oil. Water it when the top inch of soil feels dry to your finger, then let it drink deeply until water runs from the bottom, and pour off anything left standing in the saucer. Warmth, sun, and a drink when it is thirsty. That is the whole recipe. The plant rewards a little attention in a way that keeps it generous. Pinch out the growing tips regularly, especially any flower buds that start to form, and the plant answers by growing bushier and leafier, which means more of the fragrant foliage you actually want. To make the tea, gather a small handful of fresh leaves, or dry them for later, and steep them in water that has been let to cool just off the boil, covered, for around 5 to 10 minutes. What rises out of the cup is that warm, spiced, faintly sweet aroma, and the drink itself is soft and rounded, a little like a gentle spiced herbal blend. It is the sort of cup you hold in both hands in a quiet chair, letting the steam warm your face while the day finally lets go of you. Our fifth plant grows faster and more eagerly than anything else on this entire list, so eagerly, in fact, that it comes with a warning label attached, and a very simple trick to keep it in line. Plant 5 is spearmint. You know the smell already, clean and cool and green, the brightest, most awake scent in the whole garden. But there is a soothing side to spearmint that gets forgotten under all that freshness. A cup of warm mint tea has been a quiet after-supper comfort in kitchens for generations, the gentle sort of drink you reach for when you want to feel settled rather than stirred up. It is milder and softer than its cousin peppermint, a little sweeter, less sharp, and that makes it a lovely, mellow companion for the end of an evening. Here is the warning, and it matters. Spearmint is a conqueror. Left in open ground, it will not stay in its corner. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac and the growing guides at Gardener's Path, mint spreads by way of underground stems called rhizomes, which travel sideways beneath the soil and pop up new plants wherever they surface. Picture an underground subway system quietly extending its lines beneath a city, station by station, without ever asking permission. That is what mint roots do to a garden bed, which is exactly why so many seasoned gardeners will tell you to never ever plant it loose in the ground. And that is precisely why mint and a pot are a perfect match. The container is not a compromise here. It is the solution. The walls of the pot become the walls that keep the subway from ever leaving the station, so all that vigorous, spreading energy gets channeled straight up into more leaves for you instead of out into the rest of your garden. Give spearmint a pot at least a foot across, fill it with ordinary potting mix, and set it somewhere that gets morning sun with a little afternoon shade, because unlike our lavender, mint actually likes to stay evenly moist. It has less soil to draw on in a container, so it dries out faster, which means a regular drink keeps it happy. One small tip the guides mention. Grow it in its own pot rather than crowd it in with other herbs, because if you plant it in a shared container, it will politely strangle its neighbors. On its own, it is a joy. Harvesting only makes the plant fuller, which is the best kind of chore. The almanac suggests picking the young leaves in the morning after the dew dries, since the youngest tips carry the most flavor, and snipping the stems back encourages the plant to branch out bushier than before. For a cup, take a small handful of fresh leaves, give them a light bruise with your fingers to wake the oils, drop them into your mug, and pour over just boiled water. Cover it, steep for around 5 minutes, and you have a clean, gently sweet, calming green cup, one that costs you nothing and grows back faster than you can drink it. Our sixth and final plant in this scent first group is a little different from the rest, because with this one, the leaf is the whole show, and you may never brew it at all. Plant 6 is the scented geranium. These are not the common flowering geraniums people line along a porch for color. They are their cousins, known botanically as pelargoniums, and they are grown for one reason above all others: their astonishingly fragrant leaves. According to Epic Gardening and Gardening Know-How, the foliage holds tiny beads of essential oil right at its surface. And the moment you brush or crush a leaf, those beads burst and release the scent into the air. And the range of those scents is genuinely delightful. Depending on the variety you choose, a single leaf can smell of rose, of lemon, of mint, of apple, even of nutmeg or coconut. You are effectively choosing your patio's perfume from a menu. That brushing action is the entire point of this plant, and it is why it belongs right where you walk. Set a pot of scented geranium at the edge of a patio table, beside a favorite chair, or along the path to the door, anywhere your hand or your sleeve will graze it as you pass. Every time you brush by, the leaf releases its fragrance, and the space around you softens with it. There is something quietly soothing about a scent that greets you on the way in and out, without ever asking you to do a single thing but walk by. It is calm delivered through the air on your own path, for free. Caring for one in a pot is refreshingly simple. The guides recommend bright light to full sun, a container with good drainage, and a mix that dries out a bit between waterings, much like our lavender, so you water thoroughly and then wait until the top couple of inches of soil feel dry before you do it again. Pinch the stems back now and then to keep the plant bushy and full of leaves, and here is the one thing to remember for the cold months. Scented geraniums are tender, and they dislike a chill, so when the nights start dropping toward 50 degrees, bring the pot indoors to a bright window, and it will carry on scenting the air right through the winter. Some varieties, the rose and lemon and mint scented ones especially, do have edible leaves you can tuck into sugar or steep for a delicate tea. But even if you never do, the plant earns its keep the same way lavender does, purely by standing where you pass and turning the ordinary act of walking to the kettle into a small, fragrant pleasure. So step back for a second and add up what these scent-first plants really cost you. A single starter geranium, a young lavender, a little pot of tulsi, most of them will run you somewhere in the range of a $4 or $5 plant, carried home in one hand. Now set that beside the shelf at the store, specialty tea tins and the room sprays and the little bottles of pillow mist, each one priced like a small luxury, and each one destined to run empty. One of those plants in one pot will outscent an entire season of those tins and never once ask you to buy a refill. Once you actually see it laid side by side, the pricing at the store starts to look a little absurd. But scent and a nice cup of tea are the gentle end of this list, the easy sell. There is another group of these plants entirely, and these ones do not just smell lovely. They carry a reputation. For centuries, people have reached for them specifically at the edge of sleep, and one of them has a scent so strong and so strange that I owe you an honest warning before you ever bring it near your kitchen. That is exactly where we are heading next, into the slower, stranger calm plants. And I am going to stop first and tell you the whole truth about what these traditions do and do not mean. So before we go one plant further, I want to keep the promise I just made and stop for a moment, because the herbs in this part of the list are the ones people reach for at the very edge of sleep, and that means I have to be more careful with my words here than anywhere else. These 4 plants carry old reputations. People have leaned on them for a very long time. But a long tradition is not the same thing as a prescription, and I would be doing you a disservice if I let the history do the talking without saying this plainly first. Nothing I am about to tell you is medical advice. I am a gardener talking to you about plants you can grow in a pot, not a doctor and not a pharmacist. Everything I say about these herbs and rest is traditional use, the kind of thing families have passed down and herb gardeners have leaned on for generations. And that is exactly how I am going to frame it. I am not going to tell you any of these plants will treat a single thing, because that would be a promise I have no right to make. What I can honestly tell you is which plants people have long reached for and how to grow them, and how to steep them into a warm and pleasant cup. Where those two things go from there is between you and someone who actually knows your health. One piece of practical care matters more than any other, so let me give it to you gently, because it comes from a place of looking out for you. If you are pregnant or nursing, if you take any medication at all, or if a particular herb is simply new to your body, the kind and sensible thing is to run it past your doctor or your pharmacist before you make it part of your evening. That is not me being nervous. That is just the same good sense you would use bringing anything new into your kitchen. A quick word with someone who knows your situation costs you nothing, and it is the surest way to enjoy these plants with an easy mind. With all of that said, and said honestly, let us go and meet them. Plant 7 is passion flower, and it is easily the most beautiful thing on this whole list. If you have never seen one of its blooms up close, prepare yourself, because it looks less like a garden flower and more like something a jeweler dreamed up. A wide ring of pale petals, then a fringe of fine purple and white threads radiating out from the center like a tiny crown, and a strange little structure standing up in the middle. It is the sort of flower that stops you mid-step on the way to the door. And the plant that carries it is a climbing vine, which makes it a wonderful partner for a pot, because it gives you height and greenery, and those extraordinary blooms all from one container tucked into a small corner. The tradition behind this one runs deep, and it runs across cultures. According to Traditional Medicinals, a company that writes carefully about the history of these plants, passion flower has long been reached for as a calming herb, something people turn to when the mind would not quiet down late in the evening. The species most often grown for this, and the one native right across the southeastern United States, is called Passiflora incarnata, sometimes known by the wonderful country name Maypop. Native peoples of the southeast brewed it, colonial settlers wrote it down in their kitchen remedy books, and it has been steeped in dusk-hour kitchens ever since as a gentle cup for a restless evening. That is the honest frame. It is a plant with a long, warm reputation for helping people unwind. I will leave it right there, exactly where the tradition leaves it. Now, growing it in a pot is genuinely satisfying, and it wants two things above all: sun and something to climb. Gardening know-how and HGTV both point you toward a good-sized container, somewhere around 18 inches across with plenty of drainage holes, because this vine likes to send up strong growth and it needs the room. Fill it with a mix that drains well, set it in your sunniest spot, and then give it a trellis, a teepee of bamboo stakes, or even just a bit of wire fencing to grab onto. Passion flower climbs with little curling tendrils, tiny green fingers that reach out and wrap around whatever they find, so it does not need you to tie it up. It simply needs something within reach, and it does the rest. The one thing it will not forgive in a container is going dry, so in the heat of summer you may find yourself watering it often, sometimes daily, because a happy passion flower drinks. Keep it fed with a bloom-friendly fertilizer through the growing season, and it will reward you with those unbelievable flowers all summer long. For the cup, the traditional part is the flowers and the leaves, gathered and dried, then steeped like any herbal tea. And I want to add one careful, practical note, because it matters. Passion flower is one to enjoy dried and prepared, the way it has always been used in tea, rather than nibbled fresh off the vine. So harvest your blooms on a dry morning once they have fully opened. Spread them somewhere shaded and airy to dry until they are crisp, and store them in a jar. When you want a cup, a small spoonful of the dried flowers in just boiled water, covered and left to steep for around 5 to 10 minutes, gives you a soft, mild, faintly grassy tea. It is a quiet drink for a quiet hour, and it comes from one of the loveliest plants you will ever grow in a pot. Our 8th plant trades that jeweled flower for something far plainer to look at. But it brings a scent to your evening that is pure sunshine. Plant 8 is lemongrass. You already know this flavor, even if you have never grown a blade of it, because it is the bright, lemony note running through so many soups and curries from Southeast Asia. What you might not know is how easy it is to have a whole clump of it standing on your patio, tall and arching and green, feeding you that citrus scent all season. And the calm here is a gentle sensory kind. A warm cup of lemongrass tea is a soft, clean, lemon-bright thing to wrap your hands around late in the day, the sort of drink that feels like it lightens the air in the room. It has been steeped and sipped across warm-weather kitchens for a very long time as exactly that, a soothing and refreshing cup, and that easy tradition is all we need to claim for it. Growing it is straightforward, with one firm rule. Lemongrass is a tropical plant, and it means it. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac and Bonnie Plants, it wants real warmth, temperatures up in the 70s and 80s, and it will not survive a frost, so for most of us it lives outdoors through the warm months and either comes inside before the cold, or simply gets started fresh each year. Give it a big pot, at least a foot across, because a single little start will fatten into a generous clump over a season. Fill it with a good rich potting mix and set it where it gets a full 6 to 8 hours of sun. Lemongrass differs from our lavender in one important way. It does not want to be left thirsty. It comes from wet, warm places, so keep its soil steadily moist and do not let those roots dry out. Warmth, sun, and a reliable drink. Give it that and it will grow like it is glad to be alive. Harvesting is where a small bit of caution earns its place. The part you steep is the long grassy blades, which you can snip any time the clump is full, and attainable sustainable notes that the tender inner stalks near the base are what cooks prize for flavor. When you cut the blades, mind your hands, because the edges can be genuinely sharp, sharp enough to give you a paper cut sort of nick if you drag a finger along one. So take them with a snip of the scissors rather than a tug. For a cup, simply bundle a few of the trimmed blades, bruise them a little, drop them into a pot or mug, and pour over just boiled water. Cover it and let it steep for around 5 minutes, and out comes that pale golden lemon-fresh tea, bright and clean and calming in a completely different way from the flowers that came before it. Our ninth plant comes with a little joke built right into its name, because it is famous for driving one household member absolutely wild while gently soothing another. Plant 9 is catnip. Yes, the very same catnip that turns a dozing cat into a rolling, purring, blissed-out creature the moment it catches the scent. The part that surprises almost everyone is what it does for the other end of the household. That same plant, so mischievous to a cat, has a long and gentle tradition as a calming tea for people. According to gardening know-how, catnip leaves make a lovely tea, and it has been valued for a soft, settling quality, the sort of mild and mellow cup you reach for when you want to feel a little more at ease. It is a member of the mint family, so it shares that clean herbal character, and the tradition around it as a quieting evening drink is old and well worn. On a person, the effect people have long described is simply gentle. On the cat by your feet, all bets are off, and you may want to keep your growing pot up out of reach, unless you would like it flattened lovingly overnight. Growing catnip is about as forgiving as gardening gets, which makes it perfect for tired hands or a first attempt. Gardening know-how and Bonnie Plants both describe it as a genuinely easy plant, happy in a container at least 6 inches wide and deep, though a bit bigger gives it more room to bush out. It is not fussy about soil as long as the pot drains, so ordinary potting mix loosened with a little grit does nicely. Set it somewhere it gets plenty of sun, because catnip left in the shade gets tall and leggy and thin, while catnip in good light stays compact and leafy and full. Water it when the top of the soil dries, and that is very nearly the whole job. It is a plant that thrives on a bit of benign neglect, which is precisely why it has been growing happily in kitchen gardens for centuries, without anyone fussing over it. For the harvest, the leaves are what you want, and Bonnie Plants points out that the flavor is at its softest and best before the plant flowers, so snip your stems while it is still all leaf. The foliage holds its scent beautifully when air-dried, so a handful hung upside down or spread on a screen will give you jars of it for the whole winter. To brew, a small handful of fresh leaves or a spoonful of dried, covered in just boiled water and steeped for around 5 to 10 minutes, gives you a mild, grassy, faintly minty tea, the kind of unassuming cup that asks nothing of you and gives back a little quiet. And now we come to the one I warned you about. The plant with a reputation older than almost any other on this list and a smell so strong and so strange that I made you a promise 2 chapters ago to tell you the truth about it before you ever brought it near your kitchen. This is that plant. Plant 10 is valerian. Let us start with the honest warning, because you have earned it, and because it is the whole personality of this plant. It is the root of valerian that carries the tradition, and that root, especially as it dries, has a smell that people do not politely describe. It is heavy, musty, earthy, and to a lot of noses frankly a bit unpleasant, the sort of scent that has been compared to old socks and worse. Growers will tell you to dry the roots somewhere with the windows thrown open, because the odor fills a room. So this is not a plant you grow for a pretty fragrance on the patio. I would never let you buy it expecting that. You grow valerian for one reason and one reason only, and that reason is its deep and ancient reputation. That reputation is remarkable. According to traditional medicinals, valerian is native to Europe and Western Asia, and it has been reached for as a calming, sleep-friendly herb since the days of ancient Greece and Rome. Written about by the earliest physicians and steeped in kitchens across the centuries as a plant to lean on before rest. In old European folklore, it even carried a gentle protective meaning, a plant of release and quiet. That is a very long line of people, stretching back more than 2,000 years, all reaching for the same root at the edge of sleep. I am not going to tell you it does anything in particular for you, because that is not mine to promise. I will simply say that few plants on earth carry a longer, steadier tradition as a companion to rest, and that alone is a reason to grow it. Growing it in a pot asks for a little patience and a slightly bigger home than the others. Countryside and BBC Gardener's World both note that valerian sends down a real root system, so it wants a deep, roomy container, at least a foot to 18 inches across, and just as deep, filled with a rich mix that holds moisture, because unlike our dry-loving lavender, valerian likes its soil kept evenly damp. It is happy in full sun or a bit of light shade, and once it is settled in, it needs very little from you but a steady drink. The one thing it asks is time. The root is what you are after, and the root needs to grow, so you leave the plant to build itself up, ideally for a couple of seasons, before you ever harvest. Up top, it will reward the weight with tall stems and clusters of small, pale, sweetly scented flowers, so the living plant is genuinely lovely, and the strange business is all kept underground until you dig for it. Harvest day usually comes in the autumn of that second year, when you lift the whole root, wash it gently, and dry it slow and cool. And this is the moment you remember my warning, and open every window in the house. Once it is dry, the traditional cup is made from a small amount of that chopped root, steeped covered in just off the boil water for around 10 minutes, and the taste, like the smell, is earthy and strong and not for everyone. Many people who keep valerian in their evening routine soften it by blending it with a sweeter, friendlier herb, and that is a lovely and very old habit, one that carries us neatly toward where we are headed next. Because there is a quiet truth sitting underneath everything we have just covered. Passion flower and lemongrass, catnip and valerian. These are the plants people go looking for. The ones with the reputations, the ones you seek out on purpose. But some of the gentlest calm in this whole list is not exotic at all. It is already sitting on your windowsill, in the little pots of everyday cooking herbs you reach for, without a second thought. The rosemary and the fennel you have trusted your whole life, without ever once thinking of them as soothing. That is exactly where we are going next, and I think it may be the part that surprises you most, because the calm was hiding in plain sight the entire time. So let me take you to that windowsill now, the one you already have, the one with the little pot of rosemary you bought for a roast chicken 2 winters ago, and somehow never managed to kill. You have been walking past it every single day. You have brushed it with your sleeve reaching for the sugar, and that clean piney smell has lifted off the leaves 1,000 times, without you ever once stopping to notice what it was doing to you. That is the strange, quiet gift of the kitchen herbs. They have been keeping you company all along, and calling it nothing more than dinner. Rosemary is our 11th plant, and it might be the most forgiving one on this whole list. This is an evergreen shrub, which means that in a warm spot it just keeps its leaves right through the year, giving you something green to look at even in the gray middle of February. People have been leaning on this plant for a very long time. The old Greeks and Romans wore little garlands of it and burned it in their temples, and for centuries, students tucked a sprig behind the ear before an exam because rosemary was tied, in all that old folklore, to a clear head and a steady memory. According to the herb guide from Mudbrick Herb Cottage, that reputation for helping the mind stay sharp and the spirit stay calm has followed rosemary for thousands of years, right alongside its place in the kitchen. You do not have to believe any of the mysticism to feel it. Crush one small leaf between your finger and thumb, hold it to your nose, and breathe in slowly. That sharp, resinous scent is the whole point. It wakes you up gently and settles you at the same time, which is a rare and lovely combination in anything, let alone something growing in a $2 pot. And growing it truly is easy. Rosemary asks for almost nothing. It wants a sunny window and a pot with a hole in the bottom so the water can run out, because the one thing this plant cannot stand is wet feet. It comes from the dry, rocky hills around the Mediterranean, so it is built to be a little thirsty. According to the same herb guide, you water it sparingly, only when the top of the soil has dried out, and you feed it lightly if at all. If your hands are tired and your memory is not what it was, rosemary is the plant that forgives the forgetting. The gardeners who kill it are almost always the ones who love it too hard, watering it every day out of kindness until the roots simply drown. Leave it a little alone, give it good light, and it will sit there being fragrant and steady for years. To use it, you snip a small sprig, drop it into a mug, pour over hot water, and let it steep for a few minutes until the kitchen starts to smell like a walk in the pine woods. It is traditionally used to help you feel awake but unhurried, the kind of calm that has your eyes open rather than closing. Now, rosemary tends to greet you in the morning. Our next herb is one you reach for at the other end of the day, after the plates are cleared and you finally sit down. This is fennel, our 12th plant, and it is one of those quiet after-supper traditions that has been passed hand to hand across whole civilizations without anyone writing much fuss about it. You know the feeling of a good meal that sits just a touch too heavy. In a great many kitchens, from India to Italy, the answer to that feeling has always been the same. A small pinch of fennel seed chewed slowly or steeped into a warm cup while you let the evening settle. According to Puka Herbs, fennel has been used for centuries to help the body ease its way through a meal, which is exactly why so many restaurants still leave a little bowl of the sweet seeds by the door. Fennel is a beautiful thing to have growing on a balcony or a bright windowsill too, because it is all soft feathery leaves that catch the light and sway in the smallest breeze. It looks like a green cloud in a pot. The plant carries a gentle licorice sweetness in every part of it. In the leaf you can chop over a dinner, and in the seeds you save for later. Growing it in a container does take a little more thought than the rosemary did, and I want to be honest with you about that so you are set up to win. Fennel grows a long, deep taproot, the way a carrot does, so it wants a pot with some depth to it. According to Gardening Know-How, you are looking for a container that runs at least 12 to 14 inches deep, with drainage holes at the bottom so the roots never sit in a puddle. Give it full sun, which for fennel means most of the day, and keep the soil evenly moist without letting it turn to mud. It does not like having its roots disturbed once it settles, so it is happiest if you plant it and then simply let it be. In 2 or 3 months of warm weather, you can be pinching off those feathery fronds for a salad and, a little later, gathering the seeds as they ripen and dry on the plant. To make the after-dinner cup, you gather a small spoonful of those dried seeds, give them a gentle bruise with the back of a spoon to wake up the sweetness, and pour hot water over them in a mug. Let it sit covered for about 10 minutes so the flavor has time to come out slowly. What you get is a pale, golden, faintly sweet drink that tastes like a milder version of black licorice, warm and rounding and kind on a full stomach. It is one of the most companionable teas there is. Traditionally used to help you unwind and settle after eating, fennel turns the awkward, sluggish end of a big dinner into something soft. And there is a particular satisfaction, I think, in sitting down with a cup made from a plant you watched grow from a seed on your own windowsill, sweetening the very end of your own day. Our 13th plant carries that same licorice note but wears it differently, and it comes with a bonus you will love if you have ever wished your little pot garden felt more alive. This is Annie's hyssop, and if the name sounds fancy, the plant itself is anything but. It is a member of the mint family, easygoing and generous, native to the prairies of North America, and it grows tall, upright spikes of soft purple flowers over leaves that smell exactly like sweet anise when you rub them. According to the almanac, those leaves, fresh or dried, make what they simply call a delicious, soothing tea, which is about the most honest description a plant can earn. And there is the bonus I mentioned. When Annie's hyssop blooms, it does not just sit there prettily. Those purple flower spikes call in the bees and the butterflies, and if you are lucky, the hummingbirds, so your quiet little balcony suddenly has visitors. According to the Horticulture Guide from the University of Wisconsin, it is one of the finest pollinator plants you can grow, humming with gentle traffic for weeks on end. There is something deeply calming all on its own about sitting near a plant that is busy feeding butterflies. Growing Annie's hyssop in a pot suits it beautifully. It has that tall, elegant, upright shape, so gardeners like to set it right in the middle of a container as the centerpiece, the tall thing that everything else gathers around. But it is perfectly content grown all by itself in one roomy pot on a sunny step, which is exactly what most of us with small spaces are working with. It is not fussy about soil, it stands up to a little neglect, and it comes back reliably year after year in most climates, so it is very much a plant it and let it live kind of herb. To make the tea, you pick a small handful of the fresh leaves, or a smaller pinch if you have dried them, drop them in a mug, and steep them in hot water for a few minutes. The result is a naturally sweet, faintly licorice cup that needs no sugar at all. It is one of those teas that soothes as much by its softness as anything else, the flavor rounded and mild and easy to sip slowly while the light goes down. Traditionally used as a gentle, calming brew, Annie's hyssop gives you a soothing cup in a courtyard full of butterflies from the very same pot, which feels like getting 2 quiet gifts for the price of one. Now, I have been holding something back for you since the very beginning of this. All the way back in the opening, I mentioned there was one plant on this list grown not for a leaf or a flower you could gather by the handful, but for a single crimson thread. This is the one. This is saffron, and it is the standout of the whole collection. The small red luxury you can grow in a shallow pot on a sunny sill for a tiny fraction of what it costs in the shop. Now for the wonderful, slightly absurd truth about saffron. It is the most expensive spice in the world, prized for centuries, and it comes from the tiny stigmas at the heart of a small autumn crocus flower. Just 3 of those thread-like stigmas sit in the center of each purple bloom, and to gather even a small jar of saffron by hand takes an enormous number of flowers, which is exactly why it costs what it does. But the plant itself does not know it is precious. The saffron crocus is genuinely easy to grow, and it is one of the few flowers that surprises you by blooming in the fall, just when the rest of the garden is winding down. You plant the little corms, which look like small brown onions, in autumn, and a few weeks later, almost like a magic trick, up come these delicate purple cups with 3 brilliant red-orange threads glowing at the center. And it wants a pot, which is the best part for us. According to gardening know-how, the saffron crocus grows very happily in shallow containers, because the corms only need to sit a couple of inches deep and a couple of inches apart. You fill a wide, shallow pot with a loose, free-draining soil, tuck the corms in, and set it somewhere it will catch at least 5 hours of sun a day. The one rule you must never break is drainage. Saffron corms will rot if they sit in soggy soil, so a pot with good holes and gritty, quick-draining earth is everything. Beyond that, it asks almost nothing of you. It is a small, patient plant that spends the summer looking like unremarkable grass, and then rewards you, right when you least expect it, with those little jewel-bright flowers. Harvesting the saffron is the closest a windowsill gardener ever gets to alchemy. According to White Flower Farm, the best moment to gather the threads is mid-morning on a sunny day, once the flowers have opened fully and are still fresh. You reach into the cup of each little purple bloom, and with your fingertips you gently pluck out those 3 red threads. That is it. That is the whole harvest, 3 threads at a time, gathered as carefully as if you were lifting a splinter. You lay them out in a warm, dark spot to dry for a week or so until they turn brittle, and then you keep them in a small airtight jar away from the light, where a pinch will hold its color and its warmth for a year or more. There is a real quiet joy in it, standing over a pot on a cool autumn morning, collecting a spice worth more than gold by the thread, from a flower you grew yourself for the price of a coffee. And saffron carries an old, gentle reputation to match its beauty. Long before it ever became a cook's luxury, people reached for saffron when the days felt heavy, and across many cultures it has traditionally been associated with lifting the mood and helping you feel a little lighter in yourself. You will find it in warmth, steeped it with a few threads, a soft, golden, faintly honey drink that has been sipped for generations as a comfort on a long or a low evening. I am not going to promise you anything more than that, because saffron is a food and a tradition, not a medicine. But there is a warmth to a cup of saffron milk that feels like being wrapped in something soft, and a single thread is all it takes to turn the whole mug a glowing amber. Traditionally used to help you feel a touch brighter and more at ease, it is a fitting crown for this list. The rarest, reddest, most storied of all the calming things you can grow, and you can grow it in a bowl of dirt by the window. So look at what has quietly happened here. The rosemary that woke you gently, the fennel that settled your supper, the anise hyssop that fed the butterflies while it sweetened your cup, and the saffron glowing red at the bottom of a shallow pot. None of these asked much of you. All of them were sitting well within reach, in the ordinary corners of an ordinary kitchen, waiting to be seen as more than seasoning. That was the surprise I promised you. The calm really was hiding in plain sight the whole time, tucked into the herbs you already trusted with your dinner. 13 plants can start to feel like a burden instead of a comfort though, and I do not want to leave you there. Because 13 is a lot. 13 pots is a lot of watering, a lot of windowsill, a lot of remembering, and if you are tired and your hands are not as quick as they used to be, the last thing you need is a to-do list dressed up as relaxation. So before we finish, I want to do the kindest thing I can for you. I want to take all 13 of these and show you how to shrink them down to something almost effortless. Just a small handful you actually reach for, and one simple, unhurried way to turn any of them into a warm evening cup. Because growing the plants was never really the goal. The goal was the quiet evening they give back to you, and that is exactly where we are going now. So let me take the pressure off before we do anything else. You do not need all 13 of these plants. You never did. I listed that many, so you would have room to pick the ones that fit your window, your climate, and the small amount of time your hands actually want to spend on this. But if you tried to grow every single one, you would trade the calm for a chore, and that is the exact opposite of the point. Growing the plants was never really the goal. The quiet cup at the close of a long day was. So here is the gentle version of the plan. Pick 3. Just 3. A little windowsill trio you actually reach for, the way you reach for the same mug every night without thinking about it. 3 is enough to give you real variety in the cup without turning your kitchen counter into a nursery you have to manage. And 3 is small enough that even on the tired evenings, the ones where you barely have the energy to fill the kettle, you can still keep them alive with a splash of water on your way past. If you want a suggestion to start from, I will give you the easiest possible one. Lemon balm, chamomile, and one aromatic you brush against, either the culinary lavender or a scented geranium. That trio covers the 3 ways these plants soothe you. 1 you crush and steep for the bright lemony lift. 1 you dry and brew for the soft, apple-sweet wind down. And 1 that does its work before it ever reaches the cup, releasing its scent the moment you walk past and touch a leaf. Grow those 3, and you have a full little apothecary on a single sunny sill, and you have spent maybe $12 doing it. And here is a small kindness for tired hands. Do not start these from seed if you would rather not. A tray of tiny seedlings is lovely if you enjoy the fuss, but the simplest, most forgiving way in is to buy little starter plants from the garden center, or better yet, take a cutting from a friend who already grows lemon balm or mint, because both root in a glass of water on the windowsill almost by accident. Starting with a plant that is already a handspan tall skips the fragile early weeks entirely, and it gets you to that first fresh cup in days instead of months. There is no prize for growing everything the hard way. The goal is a warm mug, not a merit badge. Now let me show you the corner where they live. You do not need a garden. You do not need a balcony. You need 1 spot near a window that catches 4 to 6 hours of sun a day, which is the honest minimum most of these herbs are happy with, according to the container herb guidance from Iowa State Extension. A south-facing sill is ideal, but an east or west one will do fine for the leafy calmers like lemon balm, chamomile, and mint, which actually prefer a little relief from harsh afternoon light anyway. For the pots themselves, think shallow and wide before you think deep. Most of these herbs are happy in a container 6 to 12 inches deep, and a pot that is at least a foot across lets you tuck 2 or 3 compatible plants into one home, so long as they like the same amount of sun and water. The only ones that want more root room are the woody Mediterranean types, the rosemary and the lavender, which prefer something closer to a foot or more of depth to stretch into. Whatever pot you choose, make sure it has a drainage hole in the bottom. That one hole is the difference between a plant that thrives and a plant that quietly drowns from too much love. Fill it with a light, well-draining potting mix, the bagged kind from any garden center, and you are done with the hard part forever. And that is the reassurance I most want to leave you with, especially if your hands are tired or your patience for fussy hobbies ran out years ago. This is a plant it and mostly forget it kind of garden. The lemon balm and the mint would rather you ignored them than fussed over them. The lavender and the rosemary actively prefer to dry out between waterings, so forgetting them for a few days is basically their love language. You are not signing up for a demanding second job. You are setting a few resilient green things on a sunny ledge and letting them grow slowly while you get on with your life. When they need you, they will lean and pale a little and ask for water. The rest of the time, they just quietly get on with becoming your evening cup. So let us actually make that cup, because the ritual is the whole reward, and it is far simpler than the fancy tins on the store shelf ever let on. It starts with the harvest, and the harvest starts in the morning, not the evening. The Old Farmer's Almanac gives the same advice generations of tea growers have followed, which is to snip your leaves in the morning after the dew has dried but before the midday heat, because that is when the fragrant oils sit strongest in the leaf. You are only taking a small handful, a few sprigs of lemon balm, a pinch of chamomile flowers, whatever the pot can spare without looking bare. Do not wash the leaves under the tap. A little brush of the fingers to knock off any dust is plenty, because water on the leaf tends to invite mold in the drying rather than a clean dry down. Then you dry them, and this is where the whole thing slows to a pace that already feels calming before you have drunk a single sip. Lay the sprigs loosely on a clean screen, or a paper towel over a wire rack, somewhere cool and out of direct sun with a little air moving past. That is it. No machine, no watching. You walk away and let time do the work, the same way you let bread dough rise or a stock simmer. Over a week or so, depending on how humid your kitchen is, the leaves crisp up and crumble easily between your fingers. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange notes that gentle, low-heat drying is what protects the delicate aromatic oils. So keep them away from a hot windowsill or a warm oven that would bake the fragrance right out of them. If you would rather not wait, a fresh sprig steeped straight from the plant makes a perfectly lovely cup too. The drying is just for building a little stash, to carry you through the seasons when the pots are resting. Once they are dry, you can blend, and this is the part where you get to play. There is no recipe you can get wrong here. You are just combining dried leaves in a jar the way you would season a pot of soup, a little more of the one you love, a little less of the one that is only there for depth. Store the finished blend in a sealed jar away from light, and it will keep its fragrance for months. A word on how long that stash lasts, so you are not left guessing. Dried leaves and flowers, kept in a cool cupboard in a tightly sealed jar out of the light, hold their scent and flavor well for something like 6 months to a year before they start to fade to hay. Label the jar with the month you filled it, so you are not sniffing mystery leaves next winter. And keep them dried, not powdered, because whole crumbled leaves keep their oils far longer than ground ones do. When a blend finally goes flat, it does not harm you. It just stops tasting like much, which is your cue to step out to the pot and snip a fresh handful. That is the quiet rhythm of it. The garden refills the jar, and the jar carries you to the next harvest. And then finally, the cup itself. Warm the water, but do not boil it into a fury. A rough teaspoon of your dried blend for every mug, or a small fresh handful if you are steeping straight from the plant. Pour the hot water over, and here is the one small trick worth remembering. Cover the mug with a saucer while it steeps. That little lid traps the fragrant steam that would otherwise drift off into the room, and keeps it in the cup where it belongs. Let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes, which is exactly long enough to stand at the counter and do nothing, which may be the most valuable part of the whole ritual. Then lift the saucer, breathe the warm scent in first, and drink. Let me give you a few gentle blends to reach for, built only from plants we already walked through, so you are never staring at a bare shelf wondering where to begin. For the softest wind down at the very end of the day, lean on the classic. Chamomile and lemon balm together, in roughly equal measure, make one of the most beloved calming cups there is, and traditional medicinals and countless home growers pair them for good reason. The chamomile brings that mellow, apple honey warmth, and the lemon balm adds a bright citrus lift that keeps it from ever tasting flat. If you grew the culinary lavender, a very small pinch of the buds turns that same cup into the chamomile lavender blend you would pay a premium for in a box. Small is the key word with lavender. A little perfumes the cup beautifully, and too much turns it soapy, so start with less than you think and add from there. For an evening when you want something a touch more interesting, try a mint family cup. Spearmint or catnip as your base, both easy growers and both gentle in the mint family, with a sprig of lemon balm for brightness. It is cooling, clean, and settling, the kind of cup that feels good after a heavy supper. And if you grew the fennel or the anise hyssop, a few crushed fennel seeds or a licorice-scented hyssop leaf, steeped after dinner carries on that old after-supper tradition of a sweet, soothing digestive brew, no sugar required. And for the warm climate growers who manage the tulsi, the lemongrass, or the passion flower, you have a whole second shelf of evening cups to explore. A few bruised lemongrass blades give you a bright, clean citrus brew that is lovely on a warm night. A pinch of tulsi leaf carries that gently grounding, traditionally steeped warmth. And passion flower, dried and steeped on its own, is one of the old folk cups reached for to help the mind settle before rest. Blend any of them with a little lemon balm to round the edges, and you have made something that no boxed tea aisle can quite match, because it came off your own windowsill an hour ago. And for the nights you simply want to feel a little lighter, a single chamomile cup on its own has quieted evenings for thousands of years across Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Sometimes the simplest blend is the one blend. One plant, one mug, one quiet minute. You do not have to be clever about it. Now I have said this already, but it matters enough that I want to say it once more, plainly and kindly, before we close. None of these plants are medicine, and nothing in this whole video is medical advice. These are traditional use herbs, the kind of soothing garden plants people have grown and steeped for generations to help them unwind once the day is done. I am not promising you they will fix anything, cure anything, or replace anything a doctor gives you. If you take regular medication, if you are pregnant or nursing, or if you have a health condition you are managing, have a quick word with your doctor or pharmacist before you make any of these a nightly habit. That is not me hedging. That is me caring enough to want you safe with something meant to bring you comfort. A warm cup of homegrown tea is a lovely, gentle thing. It is not a prescription, and it was never trying to be one. So picture the evening again, the same one we started with. The kettle is on. Your shoulders are still carrying the day, the emails, the errands, the small 100 things that pulled at you since morning. But this time, when you reach up to the sill, there is a little green trio waiting there. You crush a leaf of lemon balm between your fingers and the whole corner brightens with that clean lemon scent. You pinch a few dried chamomile flowers into your mug. You pour the water, cover it with a saucer, and for 3 unhurried minutes you stand at the counter and do absolutely nothing at all, which is a thing you have not let yourself do in longer than you would like to admit. Then you lift the saucer, and the steam rises up warm and fragrant, and you wrap both hands around the mug. And the day starts finally to loosen its grip. Not because the tea is magic. Because you grew something with your own hands, tended it a little, and it gave you back this quiet minute once the day was done. That is the whole return on a $4 plant and a sunny corner. A softer evening. A slower breath. A small ritual that is entirely unmistakably yours. And notice how little it asked of you to get here. You did not drive anywhere. You did not scan a shelf of pretty boxes trying to guess which blend might finally work. You reached up to a corner you walk past 100 times a day, and the plant was there, waiting, the way a good habit waits. That is the part the store version can never sell you. The tea in the tin is fine, but it arrives as a stranger. The cup you grew arrives as something you have a small history with, a leaf you have watched unfurl, a scent you already know by heart. That familiarity is half the comfort, and it is the half no money can buy. That is what these plants were always for. Not to fill a shelf, not to impress anyone, not to become one more thing you have to keep up with. Just to sit on a windowsill, ask almost nothing of you, and turn the hardest hour of your day into something a little gentler. Pick your 3. Set them in the sun. Let them grow slow while you get on with living, and let them meet you at the kettle when you are ready. The evening they give back to you is worth so much more than the pots ever cost. If this brought a little calm to your day, there is plenty more where it came from. More easy, low-effort container ideas and gentle homegrown comforts waiting for you right here on the channel. Grow slow, steep slower, and I will see you at the next quiet cup.